Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How We Tested in 2020 and How 2020 Tested Us. Like Dan mentioned, my name is Katya. I am a product manager of Fluke Biomedical, and I'm going to moderate today's panel discussion about the trying year that we had, and all the learnings that we had from it. But before we start the discussion, I want to give you some quick information on a huge benefit of attending today's event. Since last year, you can now receive ACI credits for watching our Empower webinar series. It is a series of educational webinars by Fluke Biomedical. It includes this webinar today. In the Empower series, we cover all sorts of topics that you may be interested in as a biomedical professional, and we share our best practices, expert knowledge, and of course, we answer your questions. Then if you don't mind switching to the next slide, I wanted to also quickly show how to get to all of the webinars that we did in the Empower series last year. They're all available on demand at any time. You can go to our website, flukebiomedical.com, click on Knowledge Center, and then on webinars. If you would like to watch any and all of the webinars that we did last year or share them with your colleagues, please access them by going to the website, again, Knowledge Center, and then webinars. And before we dive into the webinar itself, let me give you a little bit of an information on how to get credit for watching this event today. There are three very simple steps that you should take if you want to receive credit for watching this particular webinar. And first thing first, you need to attend the webinar, which you're doing today. Thank you very much for that. There's a minimum duration of attendance requirement that you need to complete in order to receive the certificate. You will have to watch at least the primary discussion of the webinar today. Usually would take about 30 to 40 minutes to do that. So basically everything to the Q&A portion of it. We do like to encourage you to stay through the Q&A as well. It's usually a very interesting discussion, but it's optional and will not affect your credit if you don't. Then step number two would be after you have completed the attendance requirements, you will receive a survey link from the Fluke Biomedical team by email within 24 hours after the event. Please watch out for that email. The link will be available to you for about 48 hours after it was sent. Please be careful and access that link within the 2 days that it will be available, because if you don't, the link will expire and you will have to rewatch the webinar again if you want to receive credit for it. After you fill out the survey, you will immediately see the certificate and will be able to download it. With that, let's begin our event. So before we start, I actually want to introduce today's experts. We have multiple, which is really exciting. I will start with Michael Raich. Michael Raich is the business unit leader for Fluke Biomedical, and he has been with the business for 3.5 years now. Prior to this role as a manager, he was a product manager for the patient simulator, defibrillator, analyzer, and gas flow product lines. He was looking after both the current product and the future product roadmap. Hi, Michael. Welcome. And next we have Justin Ross. Hello, Justin. Justin has over 20 years of experience in the biomedical field, 17 of which he's been a CBAT, a Certified Biomedical Equipment Technician. He studied biomedical engineering at Penn State. Then he helped build an independent service organization from the ground up, where he managed the service division for 17 years prior to joining the Fluke Biomedical team. We're now very lucky to have Justin as our channel partner. He's covering Pennsylvania, New York City, and New Jersey. He also works with us as an associate trainer and presenter. And Justin is a veteran of the United States Marines, a father of 4, and an active volunteer, firefighter, eco rescue tech, and swiftwater rescue tech. How do you do all of that, Justin?
I don't sleep.
That is obvious. Well, thank you very much for joining us. You guys, if you watched our Empower webinars before, you probably already met Justin and Michael. We were very happy to have them as presenters before, but we also today have a few new, fresh faces. I will start with Anders. Thank you very much, Anders, for joining us today. Anders holds a master's degree in electrical engineering, and he worked 8 years as a clinical engineer in biomedical and radiation technology. He is currently our channel partner in Sweden, and before then, actually, he worked for Biomedical in the US headquarters when we first started as an organization in 2002. In fact, Anders helped us build our first gas flow and electrical safety analyzers. How great is that? Thank you very much, Anders, again, for joining us today. We're really excited to have you. And then last but not least, we have Boyd Campbell here with us today. Boyd has an impressive 34-year experience in the biomedical technology field. And as a result, he has a lot of letters next to his name on the slide. He holds certifications as a biomedical equipment technician, radiology equipment specialist, and a healthcare technology manager. Over the course of his career, he was twice president of the North Carolina Biomedical Association. Now he's the co-owner of the Southeastern Biomedical, our channel partner that supports biomedical professionals by making their daily functions easier and more productive. Hello, panelists. Thank you again for joining us today. I'm really hoping for a nice and interesting discussion. And I think to start us off, I want to turn it to Michael. Michael, I guess the question that I will start with today would be, what were the biggest changes that you saw in the biomedical business last year, and how did they inform your decision-making as a biomed business leader here at Fluke Biomedical?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing we'll speak to is the elephant in the room, which was the spike in demand for our gas flow analyzers. As you know, COVID hit, and we needed to respond to it, and the hospital market did so by trying to increase the amount of ventilators that are ready for use. So there was a huge spike, not only from our general customers, but there was also a spike that came from ventilator manufacturers. And it wasn't just the medical device companies that increased their demand. It was also there were also acts like the emergency use authorizations. People were trying to make their own ventilators, like Virgin Orbit. There were companies that stepped in to assist other medical device manufacturers, like Ford and GM, through the Defense Protection Act in the US, or the UK challenge in the UK. And really what that was the biggest thing for us as a business this year was reacting to that demand and doing our part as a business to help our customers, do what we want them to do, which is ultimately protecting patients. So as I kind of talked about that in a global sense, right? I manage it across the globe. But Anders, what did you see in Sweden?
Particularly in Sweden, I think that the biomeds are quite well equipped. So we didn't see a large increase in blood gas flow analysis. But I hear from my colleagues all around Europe, and just what you were mentioning, the other new customers, like also in the UK, we had the car manufacturers stepping up and setting up production lines for ventilators. I think they got an order from the UK government for about 10,000 ventilators. And of course, that also increases the demand for test equipment. So sure, and as all the different countries in Europe are different, you saw so different kind of needs. And one of the challenges was also to supply this equipment, because some of the countries were closing down borders, and just transportation became a big issue.
Boyd, Justin, what about in the US?
Well, yeah, we definitely saw an increase here, to say the least. We saw a lot of hospitals that were well equipped. They had what they needed prior to this, but then all of a sudden, within just a month, everybody needed more. And it was more of everything, whether it was the test equipment, more training, more experience. All of a sudden, we saw here the ventilator that had been sitting back in the corner or in storage for 10 or 15 years was now pulled out, and the dust was wiped off of it, and everybody was saying, we need this, we need this. And we saw an issue with the biomeds going, okay, we need this, but nobody knows how to work on it. Nobody knows exactly how to test this particular unit. So we saw a lot of people coming out of the woodwork, per se. I will call myself one of the older biomeds out there. You know, we'd see some of those folks that had experience on some of these things come out, and all of a sudden they were having to kick the cobwebs out a little bit, trying to figure out, okay, I do know how to work on this. I do remember how to test this, and coming up with the devices that we need once again. You know, like I said, we went from a well-equipped thing to all of a sudden we're very unequipped. And this kind of gets back to, made me think of a lot with mass casualty. You know, I think the biomeds were actually fairly well prepared for a situation that we were unprepared for. You know, a lot of times when we see this, we practice for things within the hospitals for the mass casualties. You know, if we have a plane crash or something that happens, well, those situations are usually over within a day, a week, let's even say a month. Whereas this one has carried on for a year now or a little more. And we have figured out that there was a lot of other needs that we had. And the issue that was coming up is, well, these were needs we have, but so does everybody else, not in the country, but in the world, which affected so many things that I will say we weren't necessarily prepared for. I think there was a little bit before this of this won't happen to us. We've heard about the pandemics before, back in the early 1900s, in the 1800s, but I think we got to a little bit of a state where, hey, we're in the 2000s, that this is whatever comes up, we can handle it. So, and we did, and I will say actually quite effectively, but we saw a lot of the needs come up all of a sudden now that's making us rethink, what do we need? What do we need to keep in stores? What do we need as far as our testing protocols? Where are we going to get this from now? So a definite change here, to say the least, in the U.S. for the biomeds.
Change for more than just the biomeds too.
Yes.
Oh, that's very true. And you know, I experienced a lot of that with a lot of our customers. All of a sudden, there's a lot of questions on how to do connections and things they hadn't quite thought through. You know, boy, you made a great point. They're bringing out these machines, and all of a sudden they're like, how do I connect this? How do I get this to do it this time? So we had a whole bunch of tech support questions at the very early onset. And then a term that we came from the military, a lot of hurry up and wait. We need, but then it had to get prioritized through the hospital systems. And so you'd do a lot of coding, do a lot of support, do a lot of web-based support. There's something we didn't have to do before. Now everything had to be done over the internet because we couldn't go in and visit our customers. So we're doing this web-based support, and hey, we need. Then it was silence because everybody was so tied up with the meetings and the trying to figure out the unknowns. And then all of a sudden it came back. Hey, I need this ordered, and I need it yesterday. So can I have this yesterday, please? So that was a little bit from what we saw in our area.
Yeah, no, I think everyone changed. I mean, I can speak for us as you know, those at headquarters, and you know, we had to overnight shift to working from home as well, right? So yeah, everything in terms of how we delivered those videos, how we delivered, you know, how we did demonstrations, right? How we gave tips and tricks on products, all of that we had to kind of improvise just to keep going and making sure that people got that information. And as people scrambled, there's definitely that need for information. And I remember creating the COVID page, application page along with you, Justin. So we made a couple videos about, you know, how do I disinfect my equipment, right? How can I improve X, right? So it was a scramble at the beginning just to make sure that we were getting the right information out and doing it quickly, because this did hit us like a wave.
Oh, you made a great point. You know, even just trying to establish lines of communication through your facility, because now anybody who wasn't absolutely positively had to be there wasn't there. They were shipped home. So now instead of just being able to walk down the hallway and hand something to somebody or ask a question, you have to establish, you know, a web meeting or a phone call or, uh, you know, a multi-party phone call and just trying to get everybody put together. I sure know that there have been a lot more meetings in the last year than there was up to now.
Absolutely.
And one of
And
the things
actually,
that one of the things I think that came out as a real positive over this, especially you know, talking around the ventilation, is it actually elevated, I think, the Biomed Field. All of a sudden, we became a little bit more of the expert instead of the guys who were just pushing the PM card around and doing something that the nursing staff may not understand exactly, or just fix what's broke. All of a sudden, we were seeing stories of where hospital biomeds were called up and, you know, they're meeting with the physicians and, okay, is this safe to hook 2, 3, 4 patients to one ventilator? Can we do this? We were brought into those situations or those conversations. You know, other things that we were brought into, Michael, you mentioned, you know, cleaning, disinfecting. You know, all of a sudden, here now again, we're the person they're coming to ask, okay, how can we safely do this? Is this going to be a problem with the rubberized materials? How far down can we take this apart? Do we need to take this apart? What about the next patient that goes on this? So it's really one of the good things, has had a chance to elevate us as a profession because of the way we have come through this and what we have done and what we as biomeds have contributed. So it brings us just I always like to say a little step closer out of the basement and away from the morgue. You know, the old biomed joke, how do you find the biomed shop? Just go to the morgue and we're right next door. So this has actually elevated that quite a bit, I do believe, that we can build on.
Yeah, we in the business, we use the term for our biomes, we refer to you guys as everyday heroes. And I mean, that's never been more true than now. I mean, what biomeds have been called upon to do in such a short amount of time is you know, nothing short of you know, momentous. So thank you again for all that you did do to keep everything up and running.
yeah, big thanks. And I think with that, I would like to interrupt our discussion for just a moment because I want to turn it to the audience and actually ask a question. You know, looking back into 2020, what were some challenges that affected your operations? Now that we've heard from the speakers today, I would like to see, you know, how this affected you guys. And now that we have this new platform that we're using for our webinars, you're able to actually select the options, you know, as you're watching it and submit your poll response to us so we can see and discuss them. So please take a few moments to vote. And I think we have about 20 seconds left to get the results. Before we resume the discussion. Okay, I see that over 55% of attendees today voted. Thank you very much for active engagement and participation. It's really important for us to kind of see, you know, where you come from and the challenges that you've been facing so that it can inform our decisions on providing the content that you are interested in, can help you in your everyday work. All right, so I think with that, we have the majority of people responded, and I'll close the poll right now so we can see the results. All right, so let me actually share them. Okay, so we see that, wow, that is really cool. That is really interesting. Almost a half of the respondents said that the challenges that affected their operations were actually everything that we were just talking about, which is the equipment sourcing and, you know, tracking that equipment and of course staffing. And I think we will be discussing the staffing problems later in today's event. But what do you guys think about what you've seen on the screen?
I mean, it just shows that it was the perfect storm, right? It's a little bit of everything for most people.
And we're looking at the equipment sourcing there as being one of the large issues there, but not only just the equipment sourcing, but the supplies that go along with it, the consumables, the parts. Okay, all of a sudden we're pulling out ventilators again that have been in storage for 10, 15 years. I saw some pictures out there and people were asking, well, what about the Puritan Bennett 7200A? I remember going to service school on that back in the early 90s, something like that. Okay, all of a sudden we've got these. How do we rebuild these all of a sudden? How do we get the parts? Where do we go to? And I think we even saw some manufacturers and some folks trying to make parts for these again, or come up with a solution to where these could be used once again.
I think you might have touched on a good point there, Boyd. It wasn't a single front. We weren't just fighting on one front. We had to work on multiple different fronts. It was, supplying and sourcing and staffing and everything that was listed on the screens and so much more. So you couldn't just put your focus to one problem. You're trying to focus on all the problems at one time.
True. And, as we spoke earlier, the issue wasn't that this was a regionalized problem. All of a sudden, you couldn't find a ventilator anywhere.
You couldn't find a mask anywhere.
You need. True. You couldn't find anything that you were needing. So, again, we saw this. Who was the ones out looking for this? Who were the ones that were challenged with this position? A lot of it was the biomed department, which is just awesome. Once again, that we were the ones they turned to in part of this crisis and had a big role in it.
And one of the great things about living out here in the sticks is when we ran out of hand sanitizer, all the hillbillies and distilleries just opened up and started making our own. So we were good for that, at least.
I think it really shows the flexibility of the biomeds too, that they have to step up and do all these things and help in organizing wards to become ICUs. And really, I think it shows the ability to the staff that normally don't see the biomeds.
Yeah, and from the business end, I talked about that demand, right? But there's a whole nother side to the story where we really had to scramble and work really hard to build that supply chain and ensure that we were getting all the parts, right? Just like the biomeds were, right? We have a supply chain that we have to make sure stays intact, and overnight, you were orders of magnitude bigger. And the expectation was there that this happens now, right? So that was a huge endeavor, and looking back at it, I'm really proud of what the business was able to do in such a short amount of time to make sure that we were delivering our products to customers, because it was a light switch, and we were probably part of that equipment shortage struggle. But yeah, doing the most you can to make sure that you don't run into those problems that was just a big project in itself.
Yes, and as far as I remember, Michael, when all of this happened and we saw those incredible spikes in demand, not only did we have to deliver really, quickly to customers, but also we had to, ensure that we still provide the product that has that, famous fluke quality, right? So there were additional, testing and validation benches installed in a very quick amount of time. So we had to make sure that we do not, disrupt our quality assurance processes.
For sure. I mean, with ventilators, we stay on that. I mean, that's a life support device. It's life critical, and that's the mindset that you always have to have when you're designing or manufacturing these products or using these products, right? Is at the end of the day, we're delivering patient safety. In this case, it's in a very crude way, life or death. But that's the importance of what we do here, and what you biomeds do as well. Is it's just hugely important. And you can't lose sight of that quality of those processes, and you want to make sure that every product that goes out the door does what it's supposed to do. And again, just try and get as many of them out as you can. So yeah, we never lost sight of that, and yeah, really proud about what the team was able to accomplish in the past year.
Yeah, one of the other things that was on the survey is the tracking of equipment. Well, not just the tracking, but the Joint Commission requirements. And all of a sudden, we have been taught as biomeds, life support devices do not go over their scheduled PM cycle. Well, how do we do this now, and how do we get this accomplished? And we found that, okay, as they were coming off between patients now, instead of having one or two we need to get done, okay, I've got a backlog, but I don't have 8 hours to get one done. I don't have the time to do this. So all of a sudden, we saw from our standpoint here for the testing needs is, okay, I've got to have 3 or 4 guys ready to go who can simultaneously do this to get these devices, these life support devices, PM'd and make sure they're working to the proper standards. So not only did we have the issue of, okay, we've got more in circulation, well, now we have less time to get it done and to get it back out so it's ready for the next patient, which brought on a whole another set of issues for us.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of kind of speculation and anticipation and not knowing what was going to come next. And I think that permeated everybody, but specific to biomeds, what have you guys heard from your customers kind of on that front? How did they figure out what to do next and what to do first and all those questions?
And I think one additional question that I have here is, we covered a lot about ventilators, which were obviously critical in the COVID crisis, but I also would like to hear, if there was any other equipment that you saw impacted just as much in the hospital environment during COVID.
From our standpoint, we at Southeastern, we have several different lines that we do. And one of the things that we do is we supply patient monitoring. And it surprised me that the demand that hit just all of a sudden for ICU monitoring, for example. I can tell you, we were in here working, we get a call on Wednesday, and we had a facility that needed X amount of patient devices, patient monitors that had to go out the door. And you can't just pick them off the shelf and go. Everything has to meet, once again, your quality standards, make sure everything's up to speed. And, we were pulling late nights, and it was, I never thought we would be here till, 10 o'clock on a Friday night, making sure that a van was leaving out so it could be 4 states away by 10 o'clock Saturday morning to deliver, so they could start setting up another ICU at noon that day. So that was a huge demand. If you've got a patient that's being ventilated, they've got to be monitored. So we saw that. We saw a definite increase in infusion devices that we heard of out there. So everything that goes along with it, that demand just really skyrocketed. And once again, who were the folks that were charged with getting this done? It was the biomed staff.
Hey, boy, here's one for you. Kind of obscure. It sits on the outside edges of the biomeds realm, but how about patient beds and exam tables and anything that they could get a patient to sleep on in a hallway or not? Some of my customers who deal with patient beds, any bed that they could get their hands on was gone within days. And it's the same situation. People trying to get them ready and get them out the door and delivered and decontaminated and set up and right back in. So that's a huge influx of gear to put into a system, to any hospital system.
And with all of that increased, demand for all of this equipment to be, deployed and tested, obviously, and, perform preventive maintenance on, I think I would like, once again, to turn it to the audience and understand in order to respond to all of those needs, the size of your team and the hospital was changed. And I think the question that we have here today is, whether whether you experienced any, changes in the team size. And I'll launch a poll to ask this question. So please vote. We're interested to see this, just because, obviously there was an increased demand in the biomedical services. However, we here heard that, there were some teams that were negatively impacted by COVID. There was downsized, and we would like to understand, how you specifically kind of went through this challenge and how it impacted you and your team. We will run this poll for a few more seconds, and we'll turn it over to the panelists to discuss.
I'm curious to see how this one shakes out.
Right. Okay, so I see that the majority of attendees voted, so I'm going to close it and share the results. All right, so we see that over half of those who responded did not see any changes in their team size. However, the rest of the audience kind of split somewhat in half. 20% of teams were downsized, and some of the teams were expanded. And with the teams that were downsized, and those teams did not see any changes, with this overwhelming increase in demand for the biomedical services, I would like to discuss it with you, how how that you think impacted the operations of your, of a biomedical shop. We mentioned training before, so maybe we could talk more a little bit about that, and just generally about this constantly changing environment that the biomeds had to navigate last year, and the, kind of like maybe like those some, tips and tricks and best practices that you saw in the field happen in the moment.
So I'll let you guys in the field kick it off. But one trend that I kind of saw from that is, if you stayed the same or were downsized, you had an influx of medical devices that needed to be tested. So it's almost like you had to do more with less, right? And then to Katya's point on training, right? If your team expanded, where was the expansion coming from? Was hopefully you have someone with years of experience, but if this is someone coming from school, you might have to do some training, some onboarding, getting them up to speed. So I'll pitch that over to you guys, Anders, Boyd, and Justin. What did you kind of see along those fronts?
Around here, where we're at, when they shut down things, operations, voluntary operations were shut down. So surgeries are down, and a lot of the hospitals are suffering some pretty large losses because of it. Not only did they lose the revenue source, but they've had increases of sick patients and all the expenses that go along with COVID. So we saw in our area a lot of the downsizing, and the shops who didn't downsize were experiencing, they had to social distance in their shop. So they're splitting their crews into 2 to 3 shifts. So now where most of the crew was on a day shift and could trade information and back and forth, now they're split up into 2 or 3 different times. And it became a real challenge for them to get their information from the day shift to the evening shift to the night shift and keep all that workflow to continue to go smoothly. That was a big challenge for a lot of them. It put a lot of strain on their CMMS packages, and in some cases, it really made a case for workflow automation.
Anders, I'm curious how it was in your area.
Yeah, well, Sweden is a bit different because most of our hospitals are run by the government. So anything that happens to the budgets and so on, it doesn't affect the situation so quickly. So we couldn't really see a downsizing in the staffing in the biomed shops. But of course, in some places where people got sick, they were downsized in that meaning. But I think more that they did, of course, close down some operating theaters where they did not so important stuff to move it to the ICUs. So I think it more meant that the things that the biomeds were working with changed a lot. But as far as staffing, we didn't see that big change. But again, That's different. That's just Sweden. In other countries in Europe, you have more of the privatized hospitals, like in the US.
And yeah, I kind of go along with Justin, and maybe downsizing is not the correct word. We saw a lot of facilities, they still had the same number of staff, but those staff were working only 4 days a week. We saw a lot of that as the elective surgeries went away. The staff were there, just not as much. Everybody had to cut back to maybe 32 hours a week, just due mostly to the financial issues that the hospitals were facing.
Yeah, and then there's sick time that Anders kind of touched on, right? If someone did contract COVID, them and possibly others had to go in quarantine. So that was just another struggle, right? To work around, because just because you had the goal in front of you doesn't mean you were able to get to it, because COVID's always present, right? So it affected staff in more ways than just were kind of depicted in the survey.
Yeah, and I think one of the things this really taught us is we do need to figure out how to become more productive. You know, we're always told do more with less, you know, from a financial standpoint, but this really, in our area, affected a lot of folks is, okay, just due to the size now, due to everyone having to take off 1 day a week, how do we do our jobs a little faster? How do we continue to do this? How do we keep the same high level that we're expected to do and meet all of the regulations, all of our requirements? So when the Joint Commission inspector walks in the door sometimes on that surprise visit, that we can show him very quickly, yes, we can do this. And I think this is something, this is just my opinion, but I think, you know, as we start to go through more Joint Commission inspections, this is a topic now that's probably going to come out is, okay, how are you prepared to do this? How are you going to maintain your same level of work if part of your staff are not here? All of a sudden, if we look at the context of our organizations, staffing is now an issue of that. We look at many risks in a hospital, but now staffing has become a large issue. So how do we continue to do this, and how do we do it, honestly, how do we do it quicker? How do we do it easier? And how do we keep that same level that we're doing now to make sure that, okay, we're not just going through this and doing half of a PM? How do we know that if we're bringing techs in where it said some of them, they increased, well, how do we know that these folks we're bringing in are doing it to the same level? Because we really don't have time to sit there and measure competencies on people. In those situations, you're throwing them in the fire. So we got to make sure that everybody's doing it the same way every time. And to Justin's point there, you know, that's where, you know, when we start talking about going automated and things of that nature, that helps take care of that issue for us.
It does, you know.
Oh, sorry. That focuses on training as well, because I mean, training really helps to focus that understanding, and also helps the biomeds to take those decisions. It's not only about automation, but to understand what can we do, what are we allowed to do, and what can we practically do to make it more efficient.
Right. And why you're doing it, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Tying back to that, what, you know, it's important what you guys are doing, and to not lose that quality is key.
Well, you've made a good
Anders, I like your word of efficient. You know, being more productive is always kind of a bad word when you talk to anybody. So how do we become more efficient?
Well, not efficient, but handing off projects. You know, Boyd, you mentioned that some of these PMs don't take a few minutes. Some of them could take a few hours. And, you know, there's a lot of unknowns. If you are working on it today and you're planning on coming back in tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to finish it up, but then you find out that you were exposed to COVID, or one of your family members was, you might not be back at that facility for 10 days. So how does the next tech know where all the screws, nuts, and bolts are that you took out, of where you left your PM off at? even where are you with your PM cycles? You know, we all get assigned our duties that we have to do this month. How far down your list did you get? Um, I work with a bunch of our government regulators, and we mentioned earlier about how their inspections, the JCO inspections and things, some of the state inspectors aren't even able to get in. So how are they able to do their job by in overseeing these regulations when they don't even can't when they can't get access to the facilities because of the quarantines?
Well, we cannot speak to the regulators, but what, I guess, best practices or maybe recommendations do you have for biomeds in those cases that you mentioned, Justin? You know, when you need to keep track of the procedures that you're following, or the kind of the list of work orders that you have.
Well, that's a great question, and this is one of our little bit of a plugs here. We launched out recently a test automation platform that makes building and tracking your work orders and your work order procedures much easier. With the simple red light, green light, you can see where in the PM cycle your technician left off by just looking for the last green light is and knowing where to pick up with it. It also makes passing this knowledge that we've been talking about to the next person easier by having the ability to add PDFs and excerpts and manuals and pictures. One technician can take the time and go through and do the PM and take some pictures and add it all into the one QA platform and save it one time. So then if they're home or not able to come in for a few days because of the quarantine, the next technician can pick it up and there's that data, there's that knowledge base passed on to the next person. They just have to simply open up the program and follow through the steps. That's a great way. And not to mention, it helps reduce infection control. You know, for years, we all carried around paper. So we're carrying around paper, and COVID was supposed to be, or is believed to be, a respiratory droplet spread disease. So we're going to take our paper, we're going to set it down on our table or in the patient room or wherever we're working and absorb those respiratory droplets into it. Now we're going to take that paper to the next room to do the next device, and we're going to set that infected device or paper onto the next surface, and so on and so forth through the hospital. And then ultimately, and I was just as guilty of this when I was a biomed. I used to eat at my bench. You know, I ate lunch at my bench. So I just took all that stuff I drugged from all over the hospital in my paper, and I set it on the surface I'm eating at in my office. So that's another consideration by getting away from that paper and onto an automation platform, reducing that chance of spreading the disease around in your facility.
And you know what? If COVID never happened, we would have never stumbled upon that benefit, right?
That's
We wouldn't have
very
thought of it.
true. Very true. Yep. But it's become a big topic. Every time we present now, it becomes one of the topics. And how to outfit biomed staffs who don't have laptops with a device that they can transport through and easily disinfect and clean off when they leave that area.
Mm-hmm. And just carrying less stuff, right? The more you carry in, the more you have to disinfect, and the higher the chance of spreading the infection. So,
Correct.
yeah, thinking about that is just another kind of best practice to just minimize what you take in, and you'll minimize what you take out.
And really, it goes toward a competency. You know, used to when I was in the hospital in-house, every year I would go through a certain competency with my technicians. You have to do certain PMs in front of me and make sure, that you know what you're doing. But now all of a sudden, if you got like Justin Way said, if you got a red light, green light, well, you can't halfway do that PM. You can't skip that step because you're not exactly sure what we're doing here. So I'll go on to the next one and I'll just put a sticker on it, write PM pass in the end. And also, the consistency of things that we do here. If go out and do a defibrillator, if I'm checking outputs, I'm going to do 50, 100, 200, 300, 360. I've done it that way ever since 1987 when I started in the field. Somebody may go do 50, 200, 360. Is that acceptable? I guess. But all of a sudden now we are doing the same thing each time, which I think also lends toward a reduction in liabilities that we could have, which is huge within our field.
Yeah, standardization, right, leads to risk reduction, liability reduction, and I'll harp on it again, patient safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, even there, we've been talking about how the biomeds have really become a hero in the facility. Just recently, a few months ago, we were able to get back out and start doing some demos with our customers. And it was interesting working with the customers in the facility. It was so hard for them to get 5 minutes without being distracted. We're out on the floor and we had to go pick up an X-ray machine to use or a portable X-ray machine to demo on. And from the elevator to 4 doors down where the X-ray machine at, we were stopped 3 times with questions. So, with that automation portion, as you're being interrupted in the day, did you skip a step? It's so easy to happen because somebody comes running up to you with a question on a device and you turn your focus from what you're doing to them and you missed a step or you didn't write it down properly. Having the ability to bring that data straight from the medical device through the analyzer and into the software, and it records it for you automatically so you don't have to worry about it. That's great. That's just one less way of, like you said, another layer of liability.
With that, I would
So
like
Katya,
to,
I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, I have questions. So I think what I wanted to go back to for just a little bit would be the training component that we discussed before on how, there was an increased need for, the quick onboarding of the personnel, on learning how to do the procedures quicker and more efficiently. And I just wanted to mention very quickly, and Dan, if you don't mind sharing the slide real quick so it's visual as well, that we here at Fluke Biomedical, we always try to provide, timely support in terms of free on-demand education. So the first thing you could do if you would like to, get more training or, learn more about the standards or, any of the things that we discussed here today would be to go to our Advantage training. And I know that it's not here on the slide, but if you go to flukebiomedical.com and you click on Knowledge Center, the first thing you will see there will be our Advantage training. And it's absolutely free. You can access it at any time, register, and you will get the medical device quality assurance training on demand for you or your team members, and you can brush up your knowledge or receive any relevant information about the kind of the biomed work. In addition to that, like we mentioned before, we started doing this regular webinars as well in the Empower series. And we cover all of the biomedical applications there as well. So when you go to our website and again to Knowledge Center, you will see the list of all the webinars that we have done so far, and you can watch any of them, again, absolutely free on demand, and kind of catch up on the trends and best practices and all that good stuff that we have there for you from our experts. Another good resource was developed by our experts during the COVID crisis, right? We had to be really quick to respond to the increased needs for, all the incoming procedures that had to be done by the biomeds very quickly with all this, overwhelming amount of equipment coming to the hospitals, and, some downsizing or lack of changes to the team sizes there. So we developed this application page. You can access it by going to flukebiomedical.com/application/COVID-19, where we have a variety of different videos that would walk you through, some of the good tips that our experts have for you there, and some of the other, ways to guide you through this challenging time. Anything else you guys would like to recommend to our audience?
Well, as we go forward, I think we're going to see some changes. We're going to see a lot of, I think, hospitals probably storing up equipment now that we have just another challenge of how do we make sure we keep it all PM, the batteries and things of that nature. So, and one of the last things I'd like to say, we've had probably more exposure now to the C-suite and the executives of the hospitals. This is a time to really work on elevating our field as a profession. Again, we're not the glorified maintenance guys. Nothing against maintenance, but now we are. We've really shown a value, I think, over the last year, and we need to continue to grow that as we do. as we continue.
I want to hear some questions.
Anything else you would like to cover while we're monitoring the chat and picking out the questions?
No, and really, for me, I just really want to thank all of our biomeds out there for all you guys have done, and girls, in the past year. It's really been remarkable, and to Boyd's point, it's been it's different, right? The work you're doing is getting different attention, and it's been really great to kind of watch that opportunity grow over time. So yes, kudos for all that you've done, and it's definitely was and still is your time to shine. So thank you.
And I think you'll see a definite increase in how your suppliers handle things from here on out. You know, as a calibration company, we got a lot of experience in, no, you can't come into our hospital for 3 or 4 months, and then within 1 or 2 weeks, we have 40 or 50 accounts to go, okay, I want my test equipment calibrations and I need them by Friday. While that may not be 100% possible, I think you've seen over a wide variety of things that your suppliers probably have learned a lesson from this, have taken a lot away from it, and improved in the way that, you know, quite honestly, we deliver service and things of that to you.
I agree. You know, this is what a time to elevate the field for biomeds and service professionals alike across the board. It's been a challenge for everybody. There's been so many facets that need attention, and you know, this has been a great time for us to really lobby for our right to repair equipment and access to manuals, because with not those things, without those resources, I don't believe we as a field would have been able to respond. So we continue to ask for those, you know, to be able to service and repair the equipment out there, and just keep up the good works, folks. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much to all of the biomeds out there. And, you know, one of the follow-up questions actually that I have here from chat is exactly on that, you know, the short-staffed hospitals and the biomedical department. And the question here is, you know, retaining talent due to being scared of contracting COVID-19 was a challenge. So have you heard of any challenges out there that were used?
I'm sorry, say it one more time, Katia.
So there was a challenge with retaining talent in hospitals due to, you know, the scare of contracting the virus. So have you heard of any strategies that were, you know, used by the biomedical managers out there to kind of prevent that, or maybe all of that was purely covered by, you know, trying to increase the efficiency of the remaining talent on the team?
I can speak personally for my territory. I've had 2 accounts who had some biomeds who were long in tooth. You know, they've been around the block for a few more years than what I care to admit. And they decided when the onset of COVID came that they wanted to retire. It was time for them to hang it up and go home. And those facilities lost huge knowledge bases when that happened. And in 2 of those cases, those facilities have chose to go to an automation software platform so that they can save that information. They can start to bring that data back in and pass it amongst themselves. They realized what happens when one person gets sick. You know, when it's only a 4 or 5 person shop and one person's gone, you lost a fourth of your workforce. You lost a fourth of your knowledge or more. So they've really moved towards the 1QA platforms and started to build that knowledge base so that it's there for the next person they can bring it in.
Yeah, one of the things too that help you retain people, studies have shown it's not always about the money out there. You know, it's about making your employees feel valued, and part of that is giving them the tools and giving them what they need to do their job and to do it efficiently, and to keep them up to speed, keep them up to date on things. When managers and administration listen to that, I think that is when we start seeing, you know, better retention rates. And I think that kind of takes care of a lot of that problem.
Another interesting question that we received in chat here, and I think at this point we're sort of moving on to our Q&A part of the webinar. We got so many comments here, and one of them was from Brad. Brad is saying that he's new to the field. He is a new biomed, and the question that he has for the experts today is, what do you think hospitals and other facilities will do, as we nail down on the virus, whenever that happens, to recover and prepare for other events in the future?
That's a great question, and it's one that's been talked about a lot. I mentioned in my bio that I'm a volunteer firefighter. Even moving outside the walls of the hospital and into the emergency management arena, it's been a lot of discussion. Why didn't we have these supplies, and why weren't they stockpiled, and why weren't they checked to make sure they're still good? I think that some long-term strategies may start to change, where, like as Boyd hinted earlier, we might be holding on to more equipment, which means we're going to have to maintain more equipment on different forms of equipment and the supplies to maintain that equipment. And there's going to be a lot of preparedness. There's nothing, you can't be over prepared in my mind. It's the old Boy Scout coming out of me, but you looking at things and knowing what needs to be there and when's it going to expire, and rotating your stocks and making sure that you have enough stock to cover you, because we've gotten really lax. We always assume that if something happens, 2 or 3 days we'll be fine, we'll get back into it, or we'll just order from another source. And as this last year has proven, that's not always going to be the case. When the entire world is suffering from the same infliction, there weren't additional sources. There weren't additional resources. And pretty soon we had to learn how to deal with the resources that we had at hand and how to get the most out of what we had. So I can really see these strategies starting to be talked about. Where's that knowledge? Where's the equipment? If this fails, what are we going to do?
And one of the things that I encourage is, the biomed to stick your nose in there, be involved in this, and how you can help and how you can help the hospital to benefit. The talks are already going on. The strategies are coming now. So I would encourage that. Anders?
No, I was just agreeing with what Justin was saying, that I think the organization, the strategies, the routines for handling these things, that's what the hospitals and the healthcare centers really has to focus on. And we were seeing at home where we managed to get a lot of ventilators out when there was a peak, but the problem was that they were maintained, but in the hospitals there was no knowledge anymore for these old ventilators. Even the physicians in the ICU, they didn't know how to handle them. So all those things have to be considered for the future.
And I think this brings us to a really nice wrap up of the discussion. I would like to say many thanks to our panelists for sharing their observations, from 2020. We're still in it. We're still working through the crisis. I really appreciate all of you, our attendees, for joining us today, for finding the time in your busy days to kind of learn from us. And again, we encourage you to take more training, take the advantage of us sharing all of those free resources with you. Watch the webinars, go to Advantage Training Center, and please join us for the future webinars that we will be doing. Thank you all very much, and I hope you all have a great day today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Take care.
Okay.